Ministers, senior government officials here present, members of the press, welcome to our fourth post-cabinet press briefing for 2024. To lead us in this session is our Minister of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services, Dr. Mswere, who is our chair. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Chief Secretary. Thank you, members of the Fourth Estate. Cabinet received an update on the cholera outbreak response as presented by the Acting Minister of Health and Child Care, Honorable Professor Paul Mavima. Cabinet would like to advise the nation that during the period 21 February 2024 to 27 February 2024, there were 961 new suspected cholera cases reported compared to 1,025 reported the previous week, reflecting a 7% decrease. The cholera cases are emanating mainly from unsupervised religious gatherings and funerals. However, the marked decrease in the number of cases is attributed to high community awareness, improved case management with establishment of oral rehydration points and cholera treatment camps, and the impact of the vaccination program. In response to the cholera challenges, more community health workers have been deployed to conduct door-to-door health education, to administer oral rehydration solutions in communities, and to promote good hygiene practices. In order to sustain quick wins, the Ministry of Health and Child Care will continue to monitor and supervise religious gatherings and funerals, as well as to intensify risk communication and community engagement. Cabinet has authorized the decommissioning of cholera treatment centers in areas where cases have reduced, and the redistribution of equipment and supplies to emerging hotspots, and the extension of vaccination in Harare to include other hotspots within the suburbs that were not initially targeted. Cabinet also received an update on the implementation of the carbon credit framework in Zimbabwe from Honorable Mangaliso Ndlovu, the Minister of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. As the nation may recall, government approved the carbon credit framework for Zimbabwe on 16 May 2023. Carbon credit trading in Zimbabwe is mainly through reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation initiatives. In addition, there are other non-forest-based carbon credit projects such as renewable energy and clean cooking technologies, which have raised resources through the sale of carbon credits. Previously, the projects were implemented without government involvement. Through the adoption of the carbon credit framework, the country aims to promote and regulate carbon trading to facilitate trade in carbon credits and to contribute to climate change mitigation, adaptation, and community resilience, and to enhance transparency and accountability in carbon credit trading. The adoption of the carbon credit framework nullified all pre-existing carbon credit projects that have been developed without government guidance and with taxes from the carbon credit trading business. The nation is informed that government has promulgated the carbon credit trading regulations, which provide the process for the regularization of the pre-existing projects and the approval and setting up of new projects. Through the regulations, communities are empowered to participate in the projects, whilst government monitors and verifies carbon credit trading projects. The Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife has established an interim designated national authority on carbon credits in line with Article 6 of the Kyoto Protocol. Cabinet advises that all entities wishing to trade in carbon credits in the country should register with the designated national authority. The chief responsibility of the designated national authority is to regulate carbon trading in line with the country's laws, policies, and strategies. The designated national authority has since August 2023 received a total of 13 applications for new carbon credit projects in forestry, regenerative agriculture, waste and energy efficiency sectors, with 6 of the projects having passed the assessment of the designated national authority. The project proponents are now in the process of developing detailed project design documents. A total of 8 pre-existing projects have also been subjected to similar assessment by the designated national authority, which recommended that all the project design documents be realigned in order to conform to SI 150 of 2023 specifications. The Minister of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, Honorable July Moyo, updated Cabinet on steps being taken to ensure that all food insecure people are assisted timeously. The nation is informed that the 2023 Zimbabwe Livelihoods Assessment Committee projects that 26% of the 2,715,000 of the country's population is food insecure during the period January to March 2024. Matabeleland North Province is the highest food insecure population, with 42% requiring assistance, whilst 12% of the population will require food assistance in Mashonaland West Province. The food insecure population requires 100,482 metric tons of grain during the 3-month period. The registration of food insecure people and the distribution of grain has commenced in all areas across the country's 8 rural provinces and is being led by the traditional leaders, who are also supported by councillors and other government officials. To date, a total of 2,722 metric tons of grain, comprising 405 metric tons of traditional grains and 2,317 metric tons of maize, have been distributed to 247,576 food insecure people under the Food Deficit Mitigation Program. Communities and households in distress are urged to contact their respective Ministers of State for Provincial Affairs and Devolution, who will in turn communicate with the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare on the food requirements. The registration of beneficiaries and distribution of grain will continue during the drought period. Cabinet considered and adopted the report on the outcome of measures instituted to address the country's cement market supply and demand situation as presented by the Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable Stembiso Ngoni. Cabinet would like to advise that the Cabinet decision to allow the temporary importation of cement in October 2023, the Ministry had issued 971 licenses totaling 337,000 metric tons, out of which 218,000 metric tons passed through the borders. The 4 major cement manufacturers in the country have an installed capacity of 2.6 million metric tons per annum against a national demand of 1.6 million metric tons. Cabinet notes that the local industry is now producing above optimal levels. The 4 companies are producing a combined 160,000 metric tons per month against the installed capacity of 241,000 metric tons per month. Depressed local demand has resulted in the companies stockpiling cement and reducing production. Cabinet would like to advise the nation that there is now adequate cement on the market. Accordingly, the issuance of cement import licenses is being discontinued in order to boost demand for local cement manufacturers. The Minister of Defense, Honorable OCZ Muchinguri Kashiri, briefed Cabinet on the 41st virtual session of the African Union Development Agency New Partnership for Africa's Development Heads of State and Government Orientation Committee, which she attended virtually on the 13th of February 2024. Cabinet would like to advise the nation that the meeting was presided over by the President of Egypt, His Excellency President Abdel Sisi, who is the chairperson of the African Union Development Agency New Partnership for Africa's Development Heads of State and Government. During the meeting, the Chief Executive Officer presented the NEPAD 2023 Results-Based Performance Report, in which she highlighted the strides that have been made in reducing the incidence of HIV and AIDS in Africa. The Minister also updated the meeting that Zimbabwe is domesticating the United Nations Agenda 2030 and Africa's Agenda 2063 under Vision 2030 through the implementation of the National Development Strategy 1, which runs from 2021 to 2025, and its successor, the National Development Strategy 2, which runs from 2026 to 2030. Cabinet would like to inform the nation that some of the issues raised during the session were as follows: the need for African countries to share expertise in the development of infrastructure, to find ways to intensify cooperation and coordination with international partners and international financing institutions in order to bridge the financing gap in sustainable development projects and to reduce the debt gap. That the private sector, institutional investors, and innovative sources of finance should invest in the program for infrastructure development in Africa, which aims to spearhead physical infrastructure development in transport, energy, and information communication technology. Strategies to accelerate the realization of the target aspirations of the African Continental Free Trade Area and support African countries to maximize the benefits provided for by the agreement, strengthening risk mitigation systems in order to accelerate private investment and improve the business climate. In addition to that, for African governments, development finance institutions, and international institutions to increase their support and funding for infrastructure projects, and to find ways to intensify efforts to mobilize financial resources for priority infrastructure development projects, particularly the 69 programs for infrastructure development in Africa in terms of the projects earmarked for the year 2021 to 2030. Cabinet also received the 2023 to 2024 agricultural season first round crops, livestock and fisheries assessment report and the implications for food security as presented by the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Honorable Dr. A.J. Masuka, who is also the Deputy Chairperson in charge of the Cabinet Committee on Food Security and Nutrition, who deputizes the Honorable Vice President, Dr. C.G.D. Nchuenga. The nation is informed that the first round in terms of crop, livestock and fisheries assessment aims to ascertain the area planted in terms of crops and their state, as well as to determine the status of livestock and fisheries in order to estimate seasonal production for purposes of guiding, planning and policy interventions. The country is facing an El Nino-induced drought characterized by the delayed start of rains and prolonged dry spells, which resulted in most crops planted being a write-off despite climate-proofing measures as per agroecological regions. The nation is informed that government is seized with the food security situation in the country and is intensifying efforts to ensure that no one and no place is left behind in terms of food sufficiency. The nation is informed that the country's 10,600 dams can irrigate 2 million hectares, whilst 217,000 hectares has functional irrigation and 72,000 hectares were planted under irrigated maize in the 2023-2024 season. The government has been improving irrigation by 10,000 to 15,000 hectares annually from the year 2020 to 2023, up from 2,000 to 3,000 hectares prior to this review. With over 57,000 boreholes having been drilled by the Rural Infrastructure Development Agency and the Zimbabwe National Water Authority, the ongoing assessment to ascertain the state of boreholes across the country will be expedited. Furthermore, Cabinet would like to highlight that in order to ensure sustainable food security requirements, accelerated irrigation rehabilitation and development, and the establishment of village business units in order to mitigate the effects of climate change is being intensified. To this end, the existing and innovative irrigation development programs are being promoted in order to increase the area under irrigation. Equally important is the need to harness the diaspora participation in terms of investment in agriculture financing, with particular focus on irrigation investment in order to foster the modernization and industrialization of all rural areas. The nation is informed that an investment conference on irrigation financing will be hosted this year in order to attract both internal and external investors in order to provide the necessary impetus to accelerate irrigation rehabilitation and development. Village business unit programs to ensure food security are also being intensified. The major outcome expected from the conference is that investments will enable the country's 10,600 dams to be utilized for irrigation. Existing boreholes under various schemes are being assessed, and those suitable will be equipped for irrigation and livestock programs. More drilling rigs with capacity to drill up to 450 meters will be procured. Village business units will be established by November 2024. Finances will be mobilized in order to accelerate the establishment of the targeted 350,000 hectares for summer irrigation. A robust 2024 winter cropping plan covering wheat, barley, sorghum, and maize is being prepared for implementation and will be announced soon over the November period to 2025. Government shall be issuing periodic updates in order to inform the nation on the food security situation and on the measures to mitigate the expected food security deficit. Importantly, the next report will focus on the expected national production for the coming season, and in order to ascertain the supply gap based on the stock held by the Grain Marketing Board, the private sector farmers, and others. This will inform the overall strategy. The Honorable Vice President, Dr. CGDN Chiwenga, briefed Cabinet on his attendance to the inaugural International Multiport tournament, which was termed Games of the Future. In terms of the official opening ceremony, which was held in Kazan, in the Republic of Tatarstan, in the Russian Federation on 21 February 2024. The nation is informed that the official opening ceremony of the inaugural International Multi-Sport Tournament, Games of the Future, was a success. The physical sports are indeed games for the future that appeal to both old and youthful generations. The Russian Federation is a leader in cutting-edge technology, and there is scope for enhancing bilateral economic relations between the two republics. Cabinet advises that on the sidelines of the event, the Vice President visited an agro-industrial park and a special economic zone in the city of Kazan. He paid a courtesy call on the President of the Republic of Tatarstan and held a meeting with the first Deputy Prime Minister of Agriculture and Food. The Vice President also had an occasion to meet Zimbabwean students on scholarship in the city of Kazan. The nation is informed that Cabinet approved the following: that the embassy explores effective ways to enhance trade and investment with the Russian Federation, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, in conjunction with the Office of the President and Cabinet, will expedite the invitation of ministers from the Russian Federation in the various sectors of agriculture, industry, science and technology to meet their Zimbabwean counterparts. That Zimbabwe participates in the Kazan and Moscow Games scheduled for the June and September 2024. That an interministerial committee comprising the Ministries of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Road Development, Transport and Infrastructure Development, Finance and Economic Development, and Investment Promotion, Industry and Commerce, Local Government and Public Works, Health and Child Care, Energy and Power Development be constituted to oversee the feasibility of implementing an agro-industrial park in Zimbabwe, and that the Department of Presidential Scholarship should increase in enrollment of female students for the purposes of promoting gender parity. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that detailed presentation. We now invite members from the press for questions, clarifications, or general observations.
Thank you, Chief Secretary. The three questions are all directed to the Minister of Lands. The first one is about, are we likely to import food? And in terms of climate proofing agriculture, that the pre-qualification for an individual to be able to be part of the social welfare list, they were supposed to also participate in the Pfumvudza project. So this question, I'll allow Professor Mavima and Dr. Masuka to be able to respond to the first question. Perhaps I'll start with the Minister of Agriculture, then Professor Mavima will add. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank the questioner. The first is about the pre-qualification for accessing Pfumvudza. The registration for Pfumvudza is well underway throughout the provinces. So I think that the response by farmers for Pfumvudza this season has been outstanding. 11.9 million plots were done. Last year we did 5.8 million plots. So literally every household did a plot. The distribution this year, as you know, that our consumption is based on the estimate that a person consumes 120 kgs per year. So the distribution is person based and not household based. So you get your 10 kgs a month, depending on the numbers of people in that household, the government distributes such. So we will be updating you on that aspect. Then the importation plans, I think the chairman clearly outlined that the next report is where we will have the quantities that we are estimating to produce. And we will also have ascertained the national stocks, GMB, farmers, private players, and we will then come up with a gap which then informs the overall strategy for government. And that strategy will include but not be limited to a very expansive winter program. Thank you.
You wanted to add something, Professor Mavima? Or
just to say that there's a difference between the requirement for getting inputs for Pfumvudza, which really is a climate-proof program. There are specific things that you have to do in order to make sure that it's climate-proof. There's the digging of walls in specific plots so that you can get the inputs. The question was relating to food aid, which really is targeting those who are food insecure. And that, as His Excellency has indicated, is going to target every Zimbabwean who is food insecure, so that no one dies of hunger. So there is no pre-qualification there, except that the families have to be food insecure. And the distribution, as Dr. Masuka has indicated, is 10 kgs per month per person for those who are food insecure.
The second and third question, part of it has already been answered by Dr. Masuka in terms of how can he quantify the expected yields, and in terms of the revival of irrigation schemes across the country, where are we in terms of the Blawayo crop? Over to you, Dr. Masuka.
I think the second question by Mr. Kiwa is, I think I answered to that we say most, and the actual quantum of that will be known in the next report, because the teams are out in the assessments. And then, of course, the gap that remains to meet our national self-sufficiency requirement of 1.817 million metric tons for human consumption and 400,000 metric tons for livestock known strategies to assure the nation of food security would be appropriately announced. The Navigo Temple, the revival of irrigation schemes, and in particular, Bulawayo crop. The government's quest is to fully climate-proof agriculture. And we climate-proof agriculture at two levels. First, at household level, we found that the sustainable intensive conservation method puts an interest when a house does that, and we match that with agroecological tailoring of crops, that what is grown in a particular province is determined by the requirements of that province and not necessarily what the farmer wants. So you can do pale millet, sorghum, African peas, and so on in Binga. But if you do maize, you are inviting food insecurity at household level. If we do so, we will be able to assure most households in most normal years of a good harvest. However, Fumbudza by its very nature is dry-led cropping, rain-fed cropping. So if there is a prolonged dry spell, even if you have done all the tenets of Fumbudza, even if you have done all the agroecological tailoring, matching the crops to the region, the crops will eventually succumb. We have noted an unprecedented start to the season, the driest season in 40 years. I don't know how many of you are 40 years. So you've not seen it in your lifetimes. The driest start to a season. And perhaps one of the shortest seasons we've ever had. By mid-December, rain started coming, fell through to the end of January, and since then we've not had any rains. So clearly the crops across the provinces, especially the dry-land crops, are evidently stressed, and much of that is now going towards permanent wilting point. The irrigated crop will assure us eventually of sufficiency at national level. Currently we're at 72,000 hectares that we've ascertained as being under irrigation. The bulk of that has been grown by government and the government-assisted schemes. So it will be destined for the GMP, and we will be looking at the expected volumes out of that crop. Therein lies the opportunity to harness the massive irrigation potential that the country has, 10,600 dams, and associated with that, 460 irrigation schemes. The Bulawayo Kuro project started over a decade ago. It was almost neglected until the arrival of the Second Republic, where we revived the project and changed the design for the conveyancing of the water for 9.6 kilometers, and I visited last week to ascertain progress with that project. We now are almost there in terms of irrigation. We now are beginning to irrigate from our first center pivot on a more sustainable basis. And the intention is to be able to fully bring the first 200 hectares into production for this winter, and thereafter we'll be looking for an expansion. But we brought in new engineers to be able to look at the perennial problems that had bugged that irrigation scheme, and I'm pleased that we are beginning to get on top of it, and the residents of Binga and other Chief Binga are, as expected, excited that this development is finally arrived. Thank you.
Let us move now to the last round of 3 questions. Over to you, members of the press. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Wallace Rushitso from PO. My question is directed at Minister Magaya. Last year, sometime in October, you signed an agreement with Blue Carbon Trading, and the chairman indicated that US 1.5 billion would be channeled here for carbon credits financing. We just wanted to find out if there are any developments on that one.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Okay. It's Abigail from ZBC. I understand government recently conducted the Zimbabwe level assessment program for the urban areas. When can we expect the results, and when is government going to carry out the rural assessment for food security?
Can we have our last question? The last question. Anybody who is willing to contribute? There is no one over to you, Chair. Let's respond to those two questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief Secretary. The first question is from Wallace Rujidzo to Honorable Minister Ndlovu about the agreement on carbon credits. That are there any new developments? And the second question is that when can we expect the raw assessment in terms of food security? So I'll ask Professor Mavima and Dr. Masuka to respond to this question. So we start with Comrade Magaya.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Wallace, for the question. Yeah, indeed, we have an agreement with low carbon, and it's a massive, massive agreement that we are working with them on what we are calling the compliance market carbon credit project. But in the agreement, what we agreed is that the investment is in the range of around 200 million, but it will be determined by the feasibility studies. I'm happy to say that a lot of progress has been registered to date. There is a process that has been articulated in our statutes of complying with the government's implementation framework. And they've since been given a letter of no objection after they submitted their project idea note. And they are now moving closer to conducting their full feasibility study. But because they are a key government partner, we will be working with them. In fact, in the next 2 weeks, we will be engaging the ministers of state, because the feasibility study involves a lot of consultation from devolved government structures to the local communities, so that in each area they attain what we call free, prior, informed consent from the communities. The 1.5 billion is the carbon credit pre-financing model, where after we have done the feasibility studies and we approve as government that the project can commence, and we are able to quantify the carbon credits that these projects will generate. This financing facility is then available to pre-sell some of the projects to unlock the funding. So I thought I'll just make that clarity. But we are able with the progress we have made. We believe that by the third quarter of this year, we should be having their full PDD project design document or the feasibility study report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ndlovu. So, Professor Mavima.
Thank you. The question by it was written, all right. It was Abigail. We already have very good information on the food security situation for our rural areas, coming out of the assessment that was done for the 2023 season by the Zimbabwe Livelihoods Assessment Committee, which has estimated that 2.7 million people in our rural areas will need food assistance. And this is the program that we have started implementing to mitigate against food insufficiency in those rural areas. We're covering all the 8 rural provinces with that food aid. We will definitely be getting updates as we finalize the assessment for this particular season as the season draws to an end. And Honorable Dr. Masuka can speak to that, because there's going to be a second round of the assessment of our crops and livestock to ascertain the levels of productivity, which will have implications for food security for our rural folk.
Thank you, Professor Madiba. Dr. Masuka, do you want to add something?
Not really. The ZIMLAC, as it is now called, in Zimbabwe, live with assessment committee away from the pessimistic Zimbabwe vulnerability assessment committee. And it conducts two assessments, one for the urban areas and the other for the rural areas. The rural area assessment was conducted last year, which informs the status of availability of nutrition, among other factors, through to health and other issues, to the following season, which is why we are season with the January to March. The ZIMLAC urban has just been concluded. In the Food and Nutrition Council that conducts these assessments will be released in the statement once the formal processes are done. Thank you, Chair.
Over to you, Chief Secretary.
The chairperson of the post-press cabinet briefing, honorable ministers, senior government officials, colleagues from the press, will come to the end of today's post-cabinet press briefing. Let's meet next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.